The call came at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. I remember because I was still at my desk finishing a quarterly report for a client, and my phone lit up with my mother-in-law's name. I almost didn't answer. I'd had a long day, I was tired. I thought, whatever it is, it can wait until morning. I answered. "The resort is asking for a card on file," she said. "No hello, no sorry to bother you, just that. For the family trip." I set down my pen. "What family trip?" Silence. Then, "Sweetie, my son said he talked to you about this. He had not talked to me about this. Let me back up. My name is Fiona, I'm 31. I work in financial compliance, which means I spend my days making sure companies don't do exactly the kind of thing that was about to happen to me. The irony has not been lost on me, not for a single second. I met my husband, whose name I'll just call my husband because that's all he is to me now. I met him 6 years ago through a mutual friend at a birthday dinner. He was funny. He was warm. He had this way of listening to you that made you feel like the most interesting person in the room. I fell for it completely. We dated for 2 years, engaged for 1. Married 3 years ago last April in a small ceremony in the Finger Lakes that I largely paid for because his family's contribution evaporated 2 weeks before the venue deposit was due. His mother said something came up. I didn't ask what. I wrote the check and kept moving. That should have told me everything. But love makes you reframe things. Love makes you say she was going through a hard time and he's not his mother. And this is a new chapter, it'll be different now. I said all of those things. I believed them. His mother, Corinne, is 62. She lives 40 minutes away in the house my husband grew up in, which has needed a new roof for 3 years. We know this because she mentions it approximately once a month. His sister, Bethany, is 28, lives at home, and works part-time at a nail salon. She is saving up to move out. She has been saving up to move out since 2021. In the first year of our marriage, things were fine. Strained occasionally. Corinne had opinions about how I kept the house, about when we'd have children, about the fact that I worked long hours, but manageable. I chalked it up to adjustment, new family dynamics. Give it time. Then my husband lost his job. He was a project manager at a mid-sized construction firm. Layoffs. Not his fault. Genuinely, the whole department was restructured. He was out of work for 7 months, and I covered everything. Our mortgage, our utilities, groceries, his car payment, his student loans, which we'd been splitting and which during those 7 months I paid entirely on my own. I didn't make a big thing of it. That's what you do. That's what marriage is. What I didn't realize was that Corinne had also started calling him during those months. A lot. And that the calls weren't just to check in. I found out later, much later, that he had given her money 3 times during that period. From our joint savings, once for a car repair, once for Bethany's phone bill, once for something he described when I finally asked directly as just an emergency. He never told me. I found it in the bank statements when I was reconciling our accounts one Sunday morning, 8 months after he'd gone back to work. I sat with it for a week before I said anything. I wanted to be calm. I wanted to be fair. I thought maybe he was embarrassed. Maybe he didn't want me to worry. Maybe there's a reasonable explanation. I asked him about it on a Thursday evening over dinner, quietly, with no accusation in my voice. He said, she needed help. She's my mum. That was the whole explanation. She needed help. She's my mum. I said, I needed to know. We're a team. That's our money. He said I was being rigid. He said I was being rigid. He said I didn't understand what his family had been through. He said his mother had sacrificed everything for him, and the least he could do was help when she needed it. I said, I'm not saying don't help her. I'm saying tell me. He said okay. He said it wouldn't happen again without talking first. I believed him. Again. The resort was called Sable Creek Lodge. It's in the Adirondacks. 4-star. They had a package. 3 nights, meals included, 2 kayaks, a bonfire setup that ran about $4,200 for a group of 6. Corinne had apparently been planning this for 2 months. The group of 6 was Corinne, Bethany, Bethany's boyfriend, whose name I still cannot remember, my husband, me, and my husband's uncle Douglas, who drove up from Albany. My husband had agreed to it. He had not told me. When I got off the phone with Corinne that Tuesday night, I went to the doorway of the living room where he was watching TV, and I said, "Can you explain to me what Sable Creek Lodge is?" He muted the TV. What followed was 45 minutes of conversation that I can only describe as watching someone try to assemble furniture without the instructions. He kept rearranging the same pieces. It was already booked. It was a family tradition, which was untrue. They'd never done anything like this before. His mom had been looking forward to it. It wasn't that expensive. He thought I'd be excited. "Did you put anything down on this?" I asked. Long pause. Mom needed a card to hold the reservation. "Whose card?" He looked at the TV, which was muted. "Whose card?" I said again. "She used ours," he said. "Temporarily. She was going to transfer her portion. I want to be clear about something." In that moment, I did not yell. I did not throw anything. I sat down on the arm of the couch and I looked at my husband. This man I had married, this man I had supported through 7 months of unemployment, this man who had promised me transparency. And I felt something shift inside me. Not break, shift, like a piece of furniture pushed 3 inches to the left. The room looks the same, but something is different and you can't stop noticing it. I said, "I want to talk about what happens when the transfer doesn't come." He said, "It'll come, it didn't come. We went on the trip. I know how that sounds. I know what you're thinking. Why would you go? And I've asked myself that 100 times since. But I want to be honest about who I was in that moment, which is someone who still believed that showing up, being present, keeping the peace, was the thing that would fix it. I thought if I went, I could talk to Corinne directly. I thought I could make her understand. I understand now that you cannot make someone understand something they've decided not to understand. The first evening was fine. Dinner was good. The lodge was genuinely beautiful. Pine trees right up to the windows. A lake you could see from the dining room. Fire pits on the back deck. I sat across from Corinne and I was polite. And I told myself this was going to be okay. The second morning, over breakfast, Corinne mentioned that she'd added a spa package for herself and Bethany. 2 massages, a facial, and a relaxation soak, whatever that is. She said it with the same tone you'd use to say I ordered extra napkins. Like it was a given. I said, "Oh, that sounds nice. Did you pay for that separately?" She looked at me the way you'd look at a child who had asked why the sky is blue at an inappropriate moment. "We can sort the finances when we get back," she said. I said I'd actually prefer to sort them now. "Can you tell me which card you used for the main booking?" The table went quiet. My husband put his fork down. Corinne said, "Fiona, we're on vacation." "I know," I said. "I'm asking a simple question." What followed is the part that still makes my jaw tighten when I think about it. Corinne set her coffee mug down very deliberately, looked at my husband, not at me, at him, and said, "Is she always like this?" Like I wasn't there. Like I was a weather pattern he should have warned her about. My husband said, "Mom, it's fine. It's not a personal question," I said, and I heard my voice come out very even, which surprised me. The reservation was made on our joint card without my knowledge. I'd like to know what we owe and what you're covering. That's all. Corinne said she didn't do spreadsheets on vacation. Bethany stared at her eggs. Douglas excused himself to get more coffee. My husband looked at the middle of the table and said nothing. That was the moment. Not the spa package. Not the secret reservation. That silence. That complete and total failure to say a single word in my defense, in our defense, in the defense of the basic principle that our finances were ours and not up for communal access. That silence told me more than any conversation we'd ever had. I put my napkin on the table. I said, "Excuse me?" I went back to our room. I sat on the edge of the bed and I opened my laptop and I started a spreadsheet. Not because I'd planned to. Because it was the only thing I knew how to do with the feeling I had, which was something between fury and grief and a very cold clarity. I listed every transaction I could find going back to our wedding year. The 7 months of sole mortgage payments, The student loan portions I'd covered, the 3 secret transfers to Corinne, the wedding deposit, the new water heater we put in last spring which I'd paid for out of my personal savings because we didn't have enough in the joint account, the reservation for this trip, the spa package. I added it up. It was $43,700. I looked at that number for a long time. My husband came to the room about 20 minutes later. He sat next to me on the bed, and he said he was sorry. He said his mom was just stressed. He said she didn't mean it like that. He said he should have spoken up at the table, and he didn't, and he was sorry about that too. I turned the laptop toward him. He looked at the number. He looked at the spreadsheet. He didn't say anything. "I'm not angry about helping your mother," I said. "I want to be really clear about that. I'm angry that I did this alone, without knowing it, without being asked, without any of it being treated like it mattered. I'm angry that you sat at that table and said nothing." He said, "I know." I said, "That's not enough." He said he didn't know what I wanted him to do. I said, "I want you to decide what this marriage is, because right now it feels like I'm funding a family that isn't mine, and being treated like an inconvenience for asking questions about it." He started to say something about his mother's situation. She was on a fixed income. Bethany wasn't stable yet. He was all she had. I said, "I know all of that. I've known it for 3 years. And I've helped, haven't I? Look at the spreadsheet. I've helped." He was quiet. "The help is not the problem," I said. "The invisibility is the problem." We didn't talk much for the rest of the trip. We were civil. I was polite at dinner. I kayaked with Douglas, who turned out to be a retired high school history teacher and genuinely kind, and who said, at one point out on the water, she's always been a lot, for what it's worth. I didn't respond, but I appreciated it. When we got home, I paid off the credit card balance. The full amount, including the spa package. I did it because the alternative was a late fee and I wasn't going to pay interest on top of everything else. But I took a screenshot of the payment first. 3 weeks later, Corinne called to ask about contributing to a new roof. Not her roof, her neighbor's roof. The neighbor had helped her with something. I didn't catch what, and she wanted to give him something meaningful in return. She thought $800 would be appropriate. She wanted to know if we could pitch in. I was in my car in the parking garage at work. I had 4 minutes before a call. I said very calmly, "I'll need to talk to my husband about that." She said, "It's not a big deal, honey. It's just a gesture." I said, "I understand. I'll talk to him tonight." She said, "I figured since you're both doing so well." "I'll talk to him," I said, and ended the call. That night, I told my husband. I said, "This is what happened. This is what she asked, and I need you to handle this. Not me. You." He said he'd call her. 2 days later, $400 came out of our joint account via Zelle. To Corinne, no discussion, no heads up. I found it on a Friday morning when I was checking our balance before transferring my portion of the mortgage. I closed the banking app. I opened the spreadsheet. I added the $400. Then I called my friend, who is a family attorney. Not to file anything, just to ask questions. Just to understand what I was dealing with. She said the phrase I needed to know was financial transparency, and she said very gently, "Fiona, this is a pattern. You know that, right?" I knew that. What I was still figuring out was what to do about it. The confrontation, if you can call it that, because I planned it too carefully to let it become a scene, happened on a Sunday. I had asked Corinne to come for brunch. I told her I wanted to spend some time together, just us and my husband. I made eggs and fruit, and those little orange rolls she likes from the can. I set the table nicely. I wanted it to feel normal, because I wanted her to be comfortable right up until the moment she wasn't. My husband knew something was happening. I told him the night before, "Tomorrow we're going to talk about the finances as a family." He said he didn't want it to become a thing. I said it was already a thing. He said okay. After we ate, I cleared the plates and set a folder on the table. Corinne looked at it. "What's this?" "I've put together a summary of our household finances over the last 3 years," I said, "specifically the parts that involve your household." She looked at my husband. He looked at the table. She said, "I don't see why this is necessary." I said, "It's necessary because we've been contributing to your expenses without a clear agreement about what that looks like going forward, and I'd like to have that conversation." "I'm his mother," she said. "I know," I said, "and I've been glad to help. I want to show you what that help has looked like." I opened the folder. I'd printed the spreadsheet. I'd also printed the bank statements, highlighted each transfer, each charge, each month of the mortgage I'd covered alone. The total at the bottom was $44,100 by then, with the $400. Corinne looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked at my husband and said, "Did you know she was doing this?" "He helped me put it together," I said. This was not entirely true, but I said it because I needed him to be in the room with me, not across the table from me. I felt him shift slightly in his chair. "This is humiliating," Corinne said. "It's a spreadsheet," I said. "It's not an accusation. I'm asking for a conversation about what we can all sustain going forward. That's all." What happened next was not a conversation. Corinne pushed her chair back and said she didn't have to sit here and be attacked in her son's home. She said I'd always had a problem with her. She said I never made her feel welcome, never made an effort, was always cold and calculating. I noted the irony of that word, calculating given the spreadsheet, and that her son deserved someone who understood the value of family. I let her finish. Then I said, "Corinne, I've contributed $44,000 to this family in 3 years. I think that speaks to how much I value it. What I'm asking for now is transparency and communication, not less generosity. But I can't continue without it." She stood up. She said she was leaving. She looked at my husband and said, "Are you going to let her speak to me this way?" He said very quietly, "Mom, she's right." I don't think I fully exhaled until she was out the door. The weeks after that were hard. Corinne did not speak to me. She spoke to my husband often, in calls I was not part of, in which I can only assume she worked to restore the version of events that was more comfortable for her. Bethany sent me a text that said that was really messed up what you did, and I did not respond. My husband and I started seeing a couples therapist. This was his suggestion, which surprised me. I'd been ready to suggest it and was bracing for resistance, but he brought it up first on a Tuesday night, unprompted. He said he'd been thinking about the table at the Adirondacks. He said he hadn't been able to stop thinking about it. He said when his mother asked if I was always like this, he'd felt something he described as ashamed, not of me, of himself. That was when things started slowly to change. He called Corinne and told her that any financial contributions going forward would go through both of us, together, as a decision. She hung up on him. He called back. She didn't answer. He left a message saying he loved her, and the conversation still needed to happen. We set a family budget with our therapist present. There is a line item for his mother, a reasonable one I agreed to, one that reflects what I can actually give without hollowing myself out, and anything beyond that has to be a joint decision. Not a Tuesday night Zelle transfer. A conversation. It's not perfect. I don't think it will be perfect for a long time. Corinne came to Thanksgiving eventually and was polite in the way that people are polite when they're waiting to see if the new rules are real. I think she's still waiting. But here's what I know now, that I didn't know 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, or even 6 months ago. Transparency is not a demand. It's not cold. It's not an attack. It is the absolute minimum that a marriage requires to survive, and refusing to name that out loud, for the sake of keeping a peace that was never actually peaceful, is not virtue. It's just slow erosion. I still have the spreadsheet. I keep it updated, not out of bitterness, out of clarity. That version of me who sat at the breakfast table in the Adirondacks and said, "Which card did you use?" out loud in front of everyone, without apologizing for asking. That's the version I'm keeping. She cost me some comfort and some silence and some dinners where nobody looked directly at each other. She was worth it. I've thought a lot about what made the breakfast table moment possible. Not easy. It was never going to be easy, but possible. And I keep coming back to the same thing. I had receipts. Not just the printed spreadsheet in the folder, but 3 years of quietly noticing, quietly absorbing, quietly telling myself it would get better. All of that became evidence. Not of what was done to me, but of what I had allowed. And that distinction matters more than I can explain. There's something nobody tells you about being the capable one in a relationship. People see competence, and they assume resilience. They assume you can absorb more because you haven't broken yet. Corinne looked at me and saw someone who managed things, someone who covered gaps, someone who showed up, and she concluded that the supply was unlimited. My husband, for a long time, made the same assumption, not out of cruelty, out of the same comfortable blindness we all develop toward things we don't want to examine too closely. What I know now is that the moment I stopped naming things, I started losing ground. Every time I thought I let this one go or it's not worth the fight, I was not keeping the peace. I was making a withdrawal from something I couldn't afford to keep spending. And the cost was not just financial, though $44,000 is a number that has a way of clarifying things. The cost was the slow erosion of my own sense of what was reasonable. I started to forget what I was owed. Not money, just honesty. Just the basic dignity of being treated like a full partner in my own marriage. The spreadsheet was not an act of revenge. I want to be clear about that. It was an act of documentation. There is a difference between wanting to hurt someone and needing to show them the shape of what has happened. Corinne called it humiliating. I think what she meant was that it was undeniable. Numbers don't have tone. They don't get defensive. They just sit there, and you either reckon with them or you leave the table. She left, but she came back. And that tells me something too. My husband made a choice at that table. He said she's right. 2 quiet words, and I know they cost him something. I know what it takes to say that to your mother. I am not dismissing that. But I also know that those 2 words were 3 years overdue, and the fact that it took a printed spreadsheet and a lodge breakfast to get there is something we're still working through together. What I'd say to anyone watching this, anyone sitting with their own version of that Tuesday night Zelle transfer they weren't told about, is this: the asking is not the problem. The silence is the problem. You are not asking for too much when you want to know where your money goes. You are not cold or calculating when you put a number on what you've given. Naming a thing clearly is not an attack. It is the only way to stop pretending the thing isn't there. Fiona, 3 years ago, would have let the spa package go, would have paid the bill quietly, felt the resentment privately, and told herself it wasn't worth it. I am glad she is gone.